Hello there. Welcome to the 42nd episode of the SPS podcast. We're going to be discussing a 10-year anniversary of mine in this episode, plus 7 key fundamentals that helped change my life. It's going to be a good one. Let's get into it. Welcome to the SPS podcast, the Self-Performance Strategies podcast. Unlocking the secrets to success and unlocking the secrets to self-performance so you can improve mentally, emotionally, and physically. The SPS podcast is brought to you by the Pro Accelerator program, helping business owners and business leaders save at least 10 working hours a week, improve their focus, and make more money. If that sounds like something you're interested in, check out the show notes and follow the links. But let's now jump into this episode. Hello. Welcome. We are now in the 42nd episode of the SPS podcast. In this episode, we're going to talk about 7 fundamentals of personal development that I read in a book by Robin Sharma. But also, we're going to talk about my 10-year anniversary. On February 22nd, 2013, I wrote my first words intentionally in a journal. And that's what we're going to talk about in this episode, my 10-year anniversary of journaling. Before we do that, let's frame this conversation with a quote. Getting lost along your path is a part of finding the path you're meant to be on. Robin Sharma. And that quote is taken from a book that we're going to be talking about in this episode. And I really believe in this idea. I think we're meant to get lost. I think we're meant to go off into the jungle, off our lives, get lost out in the deep, dark jungle, and then we find ourselves by finding our way back to our path, back to our purpose. And I was able to find my path and my purpose in my life because I started journaling. I really do believe that. And that all started for me in about 2013, as I said, in February 22nd, which is actually 10 years and 4 days ago when I'm recording this podcast, because I'm recording this podcast on February 26th, 2023. So 10 years ago in a couple of days, I started journaling with intention and have continued doing that every year, buying myself a new journal at the start of each year and writing in it all the way through to this year. And now I go through probably 2 full journals in a year because I journal so often. But let's put that aside for a second and actually get to how I started journaling, because the story of how I started journaling actually starts a few years earlier. Back in 2011, I was working a retail management job in a record store. It was kind of cool, it was kind of fun, but I was getting paid like $14, $15 an hour, and it was pretty shitty pay, and it was a pretty shitty job to have living in Vancouver, which is a very expensive city. But there was something inside of me back in 2011 that told me I should be learning more, told me I should be doing more. I had just been living in Canada for about a year and a half at that time, and one day I was walking through a bookstore in the mall that I was working in, and there's this massive book display with this book by Robin Sharma, The Leader Who Had No Title. And I saw it in this massive display, and I thought, wow, that's pretty convenient. I was thinking about becoming a better manager, and I thought, well, the universe has just put this book in front of me, so I picked it up. I honestly believed the book was about becoming a better leader or a better manager, and I looked at the book. I got a buzz of accomplishment from just buying the book. You know, hey, don't. You've been there. Don't hold that against me. We've all been there. We've all bought a book. We've all got that buzz of accomplishment, and then that book is then sat on a shelf for years, or even longer than that, and we've never read it. And that happened to me. 100%. That happened to me with the book. Skip forward, bit of a time jump now to 2013. And I was having this conversation with a client called Dean at the high-end luxury clothes store I was then working. I'd got my visa, I was able to stay in Canada, and I swapped jobs basically. And I got this job working in this high-end store selling luxury suits and leisure wear to the rich and famous of Vancouver. And Dean was a business owner, he was a realtor, he was also a life coach on the side. And I'd had a couple of interactions with him before this day, but he bought a couple of pairs of jeans off me. He was a really nice, chill dude. And he came in early 2013, I think it was early February. And I think it was our second or third interaction where he came in and actually asked for me. And we were going through the motions of doing the sale. And I'd been in this job for about 6 months, and it was tough. It was a kind of cutthroat environment. I didn't really enjoy the manager who was running the department I was on. Me and him didn't see eye to eye. And to be honest, I was thinking of quitting. I wasn't 100% myself in that environment yet. But Dean kind of sensed that. And he sensed that I was not 100% happy in my role. And he started asking me questions about my goals for the year. He started asking me, what's his goals? He was pointing to another sales associate. What's he going to do this year? What are you doing this year? What are you actually going to achieve in the store? Do you know what other people are trying to achieve? What are you trying to achieve? It's like, have you actually thought about it in that way? Have you actually broke it down? And when he was asking me these questions and asking me whether I knew other people around me, what their targets were, because we're working in sales, I kind of shrugged and I kind of gave it general. Yeah, there's a couple of guys in here who want to do $1 million a year. I'm aiming for something a bit lower than that, but I wasn't quite precise. I was a bit vague, and I stumbled, and I didn't really have an answer. And it kind of hit me while I was talking to this business owner, this entrepreneur. There I was, a man in his early 30s, and I had no concrete goals. I couldn't tell a successful entrepreneur who was actually trying to help me and ask me questions. I couldn't tell him any short-term or long-term plans. I actually felt a little embarrassed, to be honest. Here is a very successful gentleman. I think he was in his late 40s or early 50s at that time, and he had done well of his life, and he was just talking to me like he would probably talk to some of his buddies who were feeling a bit lost, and he was like poking me with questions and then supporting me. Now, Dean was being very accommodating and very gracious with his time, and we ended up speaking for about an hour. And he told me about the power behind goals. He told me how they worked for him in his different businesses. He told me how he planned things out. He also mentioned a bunch of books to read, a bunch of people to follow. And he mentioned me a whole swath of names that, pretty much all the popular guys that you would think of in personal development. But one name in particular sounded familiar. But I couldn't remember why I remembered that one name. Later that same night, I remember being at home, lying on my bed, watching a TV show on my laptop. It was probably about 30, 40 minutes before I was going to go to sleep. And I was sitting there and I was thinking about what Dean had been telling me that day while I was watching some dopey TV show. And I looked up from my laptop and I looked across the room, and it just hit me like boom. There was one of the books and one of the authors that Dean had mentioned to me. He mentioned Robin Sharma. And he'd mentioned a number of Robin Sharma's books, but the one that I think he mentioned first of all was the Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, which I had never heard of before. And then he mentioned the leader who had no title afterwards. And I just didn't click that afternoon because I had that book for like 2 years, but it never had become part of my mental tattoo that I owned that book, that I had that book, because I bought it and then just put it on my shelf and never read it. So it wasn't like dialed in that I knew who Robin Sharma was and I knew what this book was. So I was like, wow, I actually have one of those books, and I just felt this weird universal like, wow, that's a real connection. I mean, I bought that book 2 years ago because it was on a massive display and it just felt like the right thing to buy at the time, even though I didn't read it. And then I had a guy talking to me again. It's like the universe came back at me again and went, hey, Stephen, you have this book. You should read it. But this time the message came from a guy called Dean. So I did. I actually picked it up that night and I started reading it. And I was hooked. I was automatically hooked on the book. The book was about a man around about the same age as me who was lost and drifting in his life. Now, I wasn't necessarily as lost and as drifting as this guy, but this guy actually worked in a bookstore. Worked in retail. I think he was in his late 20s. I was in my early 30s. And he was just turning into a bit of a grumpy old dude in his late 20s. And I kind of resonated with that. And then he goes on a series of trips with this stranger he meets, this guide, the hero's journey, this guide that he meets. And he meets a bunch of impactful mentors, and he learns all these lessons. And it was the right book at the right time for me. I felt like the book was talking to me. It really framed where I was in my mindset, because I didn't have any of these habits or these ideas about personal development in the book. And it taught me a lot of the foundations that helped me get to where I am today, 10 years later, as actually a performance coach a business owner and somebody who writes about this stuff regularly and talks about it on this podcast, this really was a key moment for me. But while there are a lot of lessons in that book by Robin Sharma, The Leader Who Had No Title, I was drawn to 7 fundamentals that Robin sets out. And these are 7 key fundamentals for personal leadership. And I think they're the 7 key fundamentals for habits. Now, I've got my own 7 that kind of grew out of this, but I'll go through the 7 that Robin sets out in his book. The 7 fundamentals of personal leadership, according to Robin Sharma, are 1, learning, 2, affirmations, 3, visualization, 4, journaling, 5, goal setting, 6, exercise, and 7, nutrition. Those are 7 key pillars to life, a roadmap to success. And I actually started all of those habits. Now, visualization and affirmations, I folded into meditation. Meditation became one of my key pillars. And that allowed me to sort of do my affirmations and my visualization at the same time. So I molded those together. But anyway, I digress. But I finished the book within a few weeks. At that time, and I'm quite embarrassed to say this, at that time, that was the fastest I'd ever read a book cover to cover in my life. I think it took me about 2 weeks to actually read it. And yeah, I've read books much faster now. But back 10 years ago, 2 weeks was an extraordinary time for me to read a book within 2 to 3 weeks. I was motivated and I wanted to start all 7 habits. And obviously one of the habits was journaling. And 10 years ago on February 22nd, I started journaling and I haven't stopped. Now, I haven't journaled every single day since, but I've journaled on and off very regularly for the last 10 years. And my journaling has increased dramatically over the last 2 years, especially since the pandemic and being at home and having the availability of the journal there beside me all day long while working off my desk. And in particular, over the last while as well, 2 years again, becoming a business owner, because you need to write down your thoughts if you want to be a successful business owner. In my opinion, you really need a really strong journaling foundation if you want to be a successful business owner or solopreneur. I have 2 journals for that. One for my actual business, which I run my business like a project manager, and I have a journal that is all about that each week. And then I have an emotional journal, which is just for my ideas and things I'm thinking about and brain dumping. So I have those 2 separate ways. But I'm not going to dive too deeply into my journaling skills or my journaling technique in this podcast. I just wanted to reaffirm that I started these 7 fundamental habits back in February of 2013. So in essence, this podcast, and if you're listening to this right now, and I appreciate you very, very much if you are, but this podcast and this moment that I'm speaking to you right now, it's my 10-year anniversary of my personal development journey. It's my 10-year anniversary of me stepping up and taking back my light, taking back my power. And a lot of my key habits that I do now, today, started on that day. It started from that journal. It started from that book. And I got results in my life quite quickly. In 2013, I was promoted twice in that retail job. I actually became the manager of that department because the other manager was fired for some dodgy stuff that he'd done. And he was hiding it. Not going to get too deeply into that. But within that year, I went from being a sales associate who thought he was going to quit to the back end of 2013. I was the manager of that department. And I finished just below 6 figures in earnings and commissions in that store, which was huge, a huge leap forward for me. I nearly doubled my earnings from the previous year. I nearly tripled my earnings from the record store job, because I think I was earning about 30K a year. I nearly tripled that. I was on a brand new path in my life. And I could see a direct correlation, a direct tactical correlation between journaling, meditating, working out, eating healthily, and getting results in life. That year, 2013, showed me the power of personal development. Now, I've had ups and downs since. I've had times where I've got pissed off of it, but I've always come back to the habits, because at the end of the day, I know it's the process, it's the systems that's going to take me to my bigger, better future. Not everything's always smooth, but that initial first 6 months and year were massive for me. It was such a buzz to discover this stuff for the first time. The energy that I had back then was unmatched for those first little while. First year, maybe, I had this fire inside of me. But fast forward to today, and I can look back, and I've already said this, that is the exact moment it all clicked. That is the exact moment. I wouldn't be doing this podcast today, or I don't think I'd be doing this podcast today, or you wouldn't be listening to me if the universe hadn't put that book in front of me twice, or more than twice, probably. Or the idea of reading probably came in lots more than twice, but it put that book in front of me, and it all comes back to, a conversation with a guy named Dean I barely knew, and a book by a guru called Robin Sharma. The moment, that moment, that time in my life, that is a massive inflection point. It's a part in my movie where I chose to go a different way. The book and the conversation with a stranger. And as the Tao Te Ching said, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And when the student is truly ready, the teacher will disappear. And I can tell you, Robin Sharma was a massive influence on my first year of personal development. I don't think I'm even on his email list anymore because I've moved on to different things. But Dean, the customer, I haven't spoken to that guy in 8 years probably since I left that job in 2016, I think, or 2015 I left that high-end retail job. And I haven't spoken to that guy in so many years. I did send him an email once, and he never replied because I had his email saying how I think he did reply, actually. I told him how grateful I was for our conversation. He just sent me a thank you back. But yeah, you never know. You never know what book or what conversation in your life will dramatically change the direction of where you're going. And yeah, I'm really deeply grateful to Robin Sharma in that book, and I'm deeply grateful to Dean for spending that hour with me on a random February day. I think it was early in the afternoon or in the morning in a store in a mall in Vancouver. He spent an hour of his time as a business owner talking to me, asking me questions, and kind of lighting a fire inside of me. Like I'm so grateful for both those things in my life, and I'm so grateful that I've kept going and I'm here today doing what I'm doing, coaching other people, helping other people through the kinds of issues, helping them set their big goals and do less dumb shit and achieve the things that they want to do in their life. But yeah, I hope you all have an amazing day, and I hope you all have enjoyed the 42nd episode of the SPS podcast. If you want to hit me up on my socials and let me know what you think of journaling, let me know what you think of the 7 fundamentals of personal development that Robin Sharma set out in this book. Let me know what you think of them. Do you do those things? Let me know. Hit me up on my DMs on Twitter at Steve Timoney. It's at SteveTimoney, or you can slide on over to my website, which is stephentimoney.com. StephenTimoney. You can check out all my blog posts. You can check out all my other episodes of my podcast. And obviously, if you want to check out my coaching offer, the show notes below will have a link to that, with a link to everything else about me. But thank you again for listening all the way through in this 42nd episode of the SPS podcast. Make it a good one, and we'll talk to you in the next one.